Hi, I'm Sarith Ray, and today I wanted to talk about flatfold finishes. Never seen one of these before. It's a cute little fold with a stand so that you can stand it up on its own. Pretty self-explanatory. There are plenty of no-sew tutorials out there for these kinds of things so that you can essentially glue everything together. But I've done all mine by hand sewing it together, so I wanted to show you how to do that in case you too wanted to make one of these by hand. But first, let's talk about materials. Alright, materials. So the first thing you're going to want is a finished cross stitch. You're going to want to leave plenty of room around it. It doesn't have to be quite this much room, but you want at least an inch or so to beyond the space that it's going to be. Let's talk about what else you'll need though. I do have an article on my website detailing this in text. If you want written instructions, it'll be linked down below. Otherwise, you'll want some mat board, comic book board, cardstock, something nice and sturdy to act as the backing of your board, of your flatfold. It needs to be strong enough to, like, you know, do the whole playing card tower thing with. I was never good at that, as you can see. Nope. Okay. Point is, you want to cut it to the full size of your finished fold. I've cut mine slightly bigger than the design. That way, when it's all put together, you have a little bit of a border and it's not right up next to the pattern itself. This is what mine will look like. So whatever size that is for you, and this could be rectangular wide, it could be tall, it could be a perfect square. It doesn't have to be though, depending on what your pattern is. You'll want to cut 4 of these. Now I used comic book board because it is acid free and I want to make sure that this lasts a long time. But you can also use whatever you have around the house, such as like a cereal box. That's up to you. Optionally, you don't have to, but I like to have 2 pieces of batting the same size as my boards. So I will wrap the fabric around the mat board so that that's a little bit soft. You can't see it on camera, but it gives it a little bit of a pudge. But it also means it's not just a hard piece of board on the stitches. This also helps if you're like me and you tie knots on the back of your projects, because the knots will just be absorbed by the padding and thus you won't feel them even on the finished project like you would if it was just against the flat board. Right. So next you'll need to do some measuring. Your finished cross stitch doesn't need to have nearly this much extra space, but you do want at least an inch or so around your board so that when you go to wrap it around, you can lace it. I'm probably going to have to trim this down because you see it is right up next to each other. That's not necessary. So trim that down and we'll lace it up together. I would do probably 1.5 inches on each side. If it's a little bit more or a little bit less though, that's fine, don't worry about it. So next up, we need to look at the fabric that you're using as the back. Now there's 3 sides to this, or 4. There's the front, the back, and then there's 2 inside boards. Now, the fabric that I wanted to use for this is this like writing, because this is a Edgar Allan Poe one and it felt appropriate and it's gray and that's gray. Okay, great. Problem is I didn't have enough of this for all 3 of the fabric panels. So I'm going to focus on this one as my long one. This is the one that's going to be most visible when it's standing. We're not, well, you're standing because you're facing it, but when you're moving it and so forth. So you want that to be facing the right way and so forth. You want to make a piece of fabric that is, again, an inch and a half wider than your mat board on all sides. One side, make it extra long. But if I'm doing an inch on each side, okay, yeah, so I have about an inch on each side down here, and then up here I have 4 inches. Tack on 3 extra inches to one side, and this is what we're going to use. It doesn't have to be exactly 3 inches, we just need it a little bit longer. So this is going to fold over, and then the inside board is going to go on top of it. You'll see what I mean when we go to put it together. Point is, you need a piece that is extra long on the top side. And I say top side specifically because if you have a directional fabric like this where you want the text going horizontally, you want the top to have that extra. You want to cut 2 pieces for the inside, and again you want it about an inch extra on each side of whatever size boards that you make. I'm using this darker gray fabric because it's just one that I had enough of, and again I did not have enough of this fabric to do them all in. And since this is going on the inside, you want it pretty unobtrusive. If I had a plain gray, I would have done that, but this is what I have. Lastly, you will need a strip of fabric. I just used the leftover of this other fabric that I had. This one is 4 by 8. The main thing is you want it 4 inches wide because we're going to fold it in half and in quarters to make the connector strip. You do not need it quite this long. I think with this one, my strip was 4 by 6. You want it to be wide enough to where it holds your card stand open. Now this may change if you have a really tall design, for example. You want the bottom to be able to open up enough to create your little card stand, right? So what you can do to try to give you an idea is if you're better at the whole little card pyramid trick thing, where you can balance that, right? We'll balance the 2 pieces of card and measure how wide apart they are. Again, always leaving at least an inch extra on either side. So here we would want at least 5 inches to hold it open. Hopefully that makes sense, right? You want to measure how much of a gap you need at the bottom for it to stand reasonably well on its own, and then add at least an inch on each side. So maybe 6 would be more appropriate here. However you want it to stand open. I just used the extra, so it can be longer than that if needed, and we can trim it down when we get to actually put it together. Again, mine is 4 by 8. It could have gone 4 by 6. Having extra is better than not having enough when you go to put it together. A couple more things that you'll need besides the obvious like scissors and stuff. You'll need sewing thread. For the lacing on the inside, it won't much matter what color it is because it'll be covered. But when you're sewing together the side seams here, we'll be using a ladder stitch, so it shouldn't be too visible, but you generally want a thread that kind of blends in with whatever fabrics you've chosen. You'll also probably want some sort of decorative cording for around the outside, in which case you also want a thread that matches with the cording. So you'll see here it was attached using a similarly red thread. And that way at a distance, you can't really see it. You'll also want a hand sewing needle. It doesn't really matter what size or the head or anything. It's just, you want a sharp needle. I don't know why I decided to stab myself right then, but you want a sharp needle because you're going to be poking through fabric a lot, and that's going to make your life a little bit easier. All right, let's eat the frog first, as they say, and do the one that most people are worried about, the cross stitch. You're going to take one of your 4 backing boards and one of your 2 batting, and we're going to put our stitch on top. You may want to hold it up to the light to get it more or less centered, but we'll be able to do some wiggling around once it's secure, no worries. And as you'll see, I did trim it a little bit on the back, so there's actually a gap here. Don't have to go quite as much, but no, I didn't mention this in the materials, but if you have something to hold your fabric for you, it's going to make life a little bit easier. I use these little Wonder clips. I'll link these down below because they're cute and sparkly, but anything will do, really. You could pin these in place, you could use paper clips, whatever, and you don't need them, but it does make your life a little bit easier because you can kind of visualize if it's fully centered. If you're not sure if it's centered, you could count your Ada blocks, or you could, measure like a ruler. This is about 3/4. It's not quite 3/4. So let's move things just a smidge to the right. Is that about right? 3/4. Pretty close. Now let's see if the top and bottom is. A little over half. Closer to a half. So let's move it down a little bit. So we're about centered here. Not all of my clips are facing the same way, and it's going to bug me, but that's all right. Downside to these clips is when they've been here for a while, you'll see that there's a little indentation here. It's fine. If you rub at it for a bit, it'll eventually relax. But if you see those marks at first, don't worry about it. It will relax. Before I had them really up close. If so, you can pretty much sew there. But more likely you're going to have a gap like this. So I'm going to cut some sewing thread. I'm using good old Cox and Clark's. And again, for lacing, it doesn't matter what color. And you can actually use embroidery floss, like good old DMC. But sewing thread is sturdier when it comes to holding stuff together. Is what it's designed for. So it's going to be a little bit stronger. It's up to you though. If you do use DMC, maybe double up strands. Up to you. And I usually start by folding the corners in a little bit so that it's more of a trapezoid. That way, when you go to fold it over, you don't have to worry about little bits sticking out on the edge. And I left the selvage on there. It doesn't matter if you don't have selvage, you do it the same way. You're gonna sew across, and we're gonna work all the way down. You don't need to worry about these stitches being evenly spaced. You don't need to worry about pulling them tight right away. I usually do a couple stitches. I do go several stitches in just to make sure it doesn't fray, or when you pull it tight, it doesn't rip through the weaving. But here's what we're doing. Some people don't do this space beyond the cardstock because when we fold it, we're going to lace the other way, and that's going to pretty much take care of that. But I do. If you want, you can just start right at the cardstock. It's fine. And you'll notice that I'm not being too precious about this. And yes, I did get scratched by my cat today. Oh no. It's like she knew I was filming this tonight. Once you've got a bit on there, you may want to start pulling it tighter. You're likely to run out of thread at some point unless you made it absolutely ridiculously long and unwieldy. So what I like to do is just tie a knot or sew a knot. Loop, loop. So not, and even if it's loose here, when we go back and start adding more thread, it'll tighten it. Well, that's fine. I don't even bother cutting this off because again, this is going to be inside our project and no one will ever see it again unless I upload this to the internet for everyone to see and make fun of. But you're not doing that, right? That's a me thing. After you thread it. And I do start with a knot as well. You can thread it and knot it to itself. Again, a lot of people like to overthink this a little bit, but you just gotta tie it together. It's just whatever makes this piece of fabric wrap around this board will do. Again, a lot of people use glue for this. So if you're the fabric glue kind of person and you have some tacky glue that you want to use, by all means. Now see, this one was a little bit loose before. So when I pull this one tight, this goes slack. So I'm going to double back and redo this one a little bit. But yeah, if you want to use glue, that's your prerogative. I'm not judging. But all you got to do is glue it. So you don't really need instructions for that. I'm just here to show those of you who want to hand sew things but are worried about how it's going to look or are not quite sure how to do it, that it honestly doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. The benefit of going all the way up to the side is that if you still have a bunch of thread left over, you can just use it to start going in the other direction, like this. So we have our lacing all the way up. I'm gonna weave it up to the end here. And I'm not going to end that thread. So I'm just going to fold this over. Move my clips. Oh, actually, before I do that, once you've got it going all in one direction, now's a good time to double check that it is still centered. If not, you can kind of zhuzh it around to move it to make sure it is centered. Looks pretty straight to me. You can also follow the line of the Ada to make sure that it's not like at an angle or anything. But yeah, once you've double checked that it is still centered, we're gonna fold up the other sides, clip them in place, and I'm still attached to that end. And I have plenty of thread, so I can just immediately start lacing the other side. I like leaving the selvage because this one I don't have to worry as much about it ripping through. Not that I'm particularly worried about the Ada, but you know what I mean. It's definitely sturdier. Now, this Second way, we want to be a little bit tighter. Again, I'm not being too persnickety with this. It doesn't have to be exactly evenly spaced. It just needs to hold the fabric together and have it be sort of flat. I like to catch some of the fabric underneath just to make sure that it stays in place, but you don't have to. You can just go from the top. This piece of fabric's fraying a little bit, so I will chop off the fraying bits. I will go back a couple of stitches just so I'm not ending right near the edge. And again, just do my little knot to end. Sorry if you can't see what I'm doing too well, but hopefully you get my meaning. And I will trim this one, but not too close. So now we have one panel done. The most important part is that it's centered, and even at this stage you can kind of move it around a little bit if it's 1 or 2 squares off, but there you go. Here's what it looks like. It is not perfectly flat. It is not perfectly anything, but when we take 2 of these and put them together, you'll never see that again. You can see here that you can't see inside at all. I will post a picture of what this looked like on the inside when I was first putting it together so that you can see just how messy it was. Again, this is the back panel. And this one I do like to also use batting with, just so that it's slightly spongy, but it is not necessary. If you want just a flat back, that's fine. I don't use the batting on the insides, but I do use it on the back. Now, the trick with the back is, again, that you want it off center. So instead of before where we were making sure that it was as centered as possible, you actually want one side to have way more fabric than the other. The other thing is, since I did not have a ton of this fabric, I only have a 1-inch margin instead of the several inches I did with my cross stitch. So you'll see that it's a much wider gap. But that's because I did not have enough of this fabric to do it any closer. And it was totally intentional, so I could show you that even if you don't leave a large border, you can still do this. Yep, it was intentional. I mean, ideally, if you're planning to do this as a finish, you plan ahead and have space around your cross stitch. But if you just have an old cross stitch that you want to turn into something, but it doesn't have a ton of extra space around it, like this, it's fine. We can still do this. We're going to work basically as before, basically as we did before, except that when we go this way, we're not going to fold up that side. We're only going to fold up this side. However, we do want to stitch this together. So I'm going to do that thing where I try to force the fabric to go in a little bit. Doesn't have to be a ton. And I'm going to start on this side because that way if I end on this side, I can just fold it up. And I'll show you what I do then. Oop. This part's going to be on the inside, so another thing you might want to do is to keep it cutting in a little bit like this. I will sew it to itself. Just a couple stitches. Stitch across. And stitch it to itself. Just to make sure it doesn't move around too much. I'm going to trim all of this fraying. It's probably going to fray a little bit more before I go to put it all together, but that's just to get it out of my way while I sew. And because this is probably already getting a bit long, we're going to switch to some time-lapse mode while I sew this up. The trick with this part is because the board's not there to hold it open. If you pull it too tight, it's going to scrunch up. So doing it on a flat surface, you can kind of hold it open to make sure that you're lacing it together, but it's not bunching up, if that makes sense. Alright, when I reach the end here, not quite to the flap, I'm gonna stitch up the side here. And I'm gonna fold this up and clip it in place so that it's not wiggling around while I'm trying to stitch it. Nope. Actually, force it forward a little bit. Fold it up. Clip. And I'm going to stitch the fold of this flap to the edges here so that it's held in place by something, because obviously we're not lacing it across to the other side. I just want it to be secure. Now I don't have much of this thread left. If I did have a whole bunch of thread left, once I secured that side, I would just stitch across. It might be enough. We'll see. Stitch across just to get over there. And again, stitch this little side of flap to itself. That's probably enough. I'm playing thread chicken. It's fine. How many of you haven't played thread chicken before? Be honest. And again, I'm ending with a knot, and it doesn't have to be super pretty. So at the end, you're left with a pattern, and as you see that little clip mark wears off, you can kind of see it over here. See how it's pinched? Just kind of scratch at it a little bit, and it's gone. So you have a laced bit, but you have this whole extra flap, and that is going to be stitched to the other one later. Now we have our front, we have our back. I'm going to do the insides. I'm going to again speed through these because it's essentially the same thing that we've been doing. But this time no batting, just the board. This doesn't even have to be straight since it's not a directional fabric or anything. It just needs to be sewn together. Alrighty, so we have our 4 pieces here. We have the front, we have the back with the extra flap, Now we have our two inside pieces that don't have any batting. Basically how this is going to work is we're going to sew one of these to the back. We're going to put one of these up front. We're going to fold this over and sew it to that inside piece so that that's the hinge. And then we'll sew the front on top, making a little sandwich. Yeah. But first, I gotta make the little flap. So what I'm gonna do is take this 4-inch by ?inch strip and fold it in half. If you have an iron handy, now's the time to iron that flat. And then we're going to fold into that center. Could use an iron. I'm just using my nail to make horrible scratching sounds on camera. That in. Fold that open. We have a nice thick little strip. Now I'm gonna stitch this closed using a ladder stitch. Before I was using white thread because that's what I have a lot of. It's a little hard to see on camera, but oh well. But now I'm switching to that gray thread because I want it to blend in as much as possible. And we're going to be using a ladder stitch to make that as seamless as possible. Going across, stitching a small amount. It doesn't have to be exact each time. So we have our gap. We're going straight across so that there's only the tiniest little bit of thread. Taking another little chunk out of the edge of that. And then again, going straight across, taking another little chunk. But if we open this up, you can see a little bit better what that will look like. So we're just going across. Hello? Autofocus? No? No? Well, okay. And you don't need to tighten it as you go. So you can go across, just take another little chunk, go across this way. So you're making a little ladder where only the across bits show up. And then when you pull it tight, it's pretty seamless. Obviously the thread pokes through a little bit, but it's not super visible. I will again put the image from the Animal Crossing one on screen so you can hopefully see it better. If you want to donate towards a better camera, that's what my Ko-fi goal is. Ko-fi? Coffee? But Ko-fi is where I put all of my free cross-stitch patterns. But it's also where you can tip creators monetarily if you would like to support them. We're going to essentially go all the way across this little flap, stitching it together, pulling it tight every once in a while. Just take it slow. And it doesn't have to be exactly evenly spaced apart, but one trick that people have done is to draw a little marking on your nail. If you have nails, obviously I chew my nails, but to be able to evenly space your stitches. But if you don't want to do that, that's a-okay. It does not have to be perfect. If you have a patterned fabric, like a geometrically patterned, like, I don't know, gingham or stripes or something like that. You can also use the fabric pattern as a guide to evenly space your stitches. I kind of do, like I could have spaced it based on the text, but I didn't. I'm just slowly going across, back and forth, making that little tube. And at the end, I'm just gonna knot off in there. We've got a little strip. Now we've got all our pieces. It's time to start putting them together. But I am a little tired. So I'm going to do that tomorrow, but for you, and it'll be in about 3 seconds. The first thing we want to do is attach the small fold strip to the back panel with the weird flap. We want to center it, so let me actually measure for once. You could just eyeball it. It would probably be fine. But we're looking at about halfway. And you can mark this however, considering it's all inside and it's not going to matter. Okay. I'm using a washable pen out of sheer habit, but it's not necessary. This part doesn't matter what color thread you use because it's inside, but I already had my needle threaded with gray, so that's fine. You don't need a ton in here, so if your flap is a little bit on the short side, you can, get away with a little bit less, but mine's extra long, so I'm just going to roughly stitch this in just to hold it in place. This is all on the inside, so your stitches absolutely do not need to be pretty. Why are my hands so pink? Camera, why? Anyway, not important. You do not have to have lobster hands to make this, I promise. I'm just haphazardly stitching through both fabrics. It doesn't even matter. There's no pattern. It's not tidy. If you want to be tidy, go for it. I can't even get through it without making a knot, apparently. Okay. Hey, like, if you want to be extra tidy, that's fine. It's a good place to practice tidy stitching, just because if you don't get it just right, it's not a big deal. And you can try again next time. Okay. So we have our tab. It doesn't even have to go all the way to the end, because when we sew on the next part, we'll secure that, so it's not a big deal. It just needs to be held in place. Now, you want to take one of the inside boards, so the ones without padding, and sandwich it on top here. Now clips, clip it in place to hold it for you. You want to leave the flap on the outside as well as the tongue, I guess. I don't know what to call that. It doesn't matter. Now, we're not stitching this part up here. That's going to be left bare, but we are going to be stitching the other 3 sides together. So from one side, straight across, taking a little pinch of fabric, and then straight across again, taking a little pinch of fabric on the other side, straight across, taking a bit more. Again, I'm not making these super tidy, so they're not like exactly a 1/4 inch in size or whatever. I'm just eyeballing it. The important part is to always go straight across so that only one little straight stitch is visible. And every once in a while you can pull it a little bit tight so that it cinches in and you're not seeing that thread. Using a thread that kind of blends in with the fabric helps here as well. I've got 2 different fabrics and a 3rd gray is the thread, so it's whatever. But the important part is that you get these 2 panels attached to them. So I'm going to work all the way around and then we'll proceed to the next part. So when you get to the tongue, as I'm calling it for now, you want to end one of your stitches right up next to it. Go across like you normally would. And with your next stitch, you want to go through the tongue. And then into the other side, like continuing the ladder stitch just through that extra piece of fabric. I'm going to do it again. So you want to go back through. Not catch your thread on clip. And then take another little chunk. Right. Back through. And another little chunk to get you right back to the outer edge of that. So now that is fully secure and stitched in, and you just continue around until you complete that 3rd side. All right, for the next part, you're going to take the other inside piece and you want to put this facing up, like opposite the other one. And then you'll clip the bottom in place so that it doesn't move and that it's lined up with the others. But we're going to fold the flap over and pull it tightly. Clearly the flap doesn't need to be this big. It could have just been like 2 inches. But this is what happened. So now I am stitching the flap from the backing to the sides of the inner piece. This part will not be visible, so be as messy as you like, but I'm just making stitches along the edges here to stitch it in place. It's basically just to hold it until we stitch the part on top of it. Move the clips when you need to, or set them a bit for catching on everything, and work your way down until that flap has been secured. Rather than end the thread and start it again on the other side, I'm just gonna run this right across loosely. And then start stitching the other side. I'm going to leave this strand here because I'm going to be stitching the next part on there starting here. But we need to figure out what we're doing with this tongue, as I keep calling it. So we need to figure out how much we want this to open up to stand on its own. So I usually stand it, get an idea of how wide we want it to be able to open. And then we're going to be stitching the remainder of the tongue into that center part. Now, obviously, if you measured earlier, you don't have this much extra, but I'm going to put it right about, let's match it up with the other one just so that if they're put next to each other, they don't look weird. Yeah, about there. I'm going to clip this in place so I can lose it, and I'm going to measure to make sure that it's centered because why not? It is not centered at all. Let's try again. First of all, the center of this. Do it up here so that it's fine. And then the center of so that should roughly line up. Let's move it over just a bit so we don't lose that position from earlier. Okay. Does it look centered now? Yeah, just about. Cool. But still. So now we're once again gonna stitch this tongue to this inside section. I'm actually gonna cut off some of it because it's not needed. And let's stitch that. Again, this is all going on the inside. Doesn't have to be pretty. It's just holding it in place so that we know exactly where it needs to go when we sandwich the top layer on. And then I'm gonna knot that end because it's all gonna be inside in. Okay. So we have our thing. Test it real quick to make sure that it stands straight. Looks good. Here's what it looks like on the side. And we're gonna sandwich our cross stitch on top. Clip things in place so that it doesn't wiggle around while we're stitching. And we're going to use that same ladder stitch to stitch the cross stitch only to this center piece. We're not going to accidentally stitch this closed, right? But we're going to stitch all the way around. This one's a little bit easier to keep even just because you can use the Ada squares as a count. So like if you wanted to, you could do it every 4 stitches or every 3 stitches or whatever. But again, doesn't have to be super even, especially if you're going to be covering it and cording in a little bit. So just work your way around, just like before. When you get to the tongue, make sure you're stabbing through. So this time we want to stitch the top layer together as well. It's a little awkward trying to figure out how to hold it, but you got this. You can do it. It is now fully put together. And we're done. You have a cute little flatfold that you can put on your shelf. You can't really stand it up to camera because it's aimed down at my desk, so no. But it exists. I will post clearer pictures of it once it's fully done. You could just stop here. This is sufficient. I like to do a little bit of cording around the edge just to give it a little bit more something. You could put like ribbons, you could have done like beads along the edge as you stitch them if you wanted. That's up to you. If you want to finish it with a cord like I did, let's go through how I did this one. So I have some purple cording here that I'm going to use. And the first thing is that I want to leave an amount of extra cord down here. I'm going to tie it in a knot to have this at the end. And when I take off this tape, it will fray out like this, right? To make a little tassel type thing. But I want it in a knot so it stops fraying past that. This is how much I want to leave, and then I will carry that over here. And we're going to clip it in place for now. And I'm going with purple because it matches my library and it'll fit nicely with the rest of the decor in there. You want to clip it just to the front to make sure that you're only sewing to the front when you get to it. And I like to leave it on the spool until it's fully attached, just to make sure I know exactly how much I'm going to need. But you could measure around and just leave yourself a nice long tail. That's up to you. But I'm going to leave it on the spool as I work. I don't have the right shade of purple for this, but I mean, it's close enough. You're hardly going to see it anyway. And you want to start in whichever corner you want the tassels hanging from. I did upper left. And let's just anchor your thread into the corner. Do any knots or securing that you want to do. Right? And now you want to, how do I put this? Start on one of the sides as if you were doing the ladder stitch someone. And what you're doing is laying the thread across in between the cording so that you're following the pattern of the cording. So where you go up, let me take these clips off so I'm not rubbing them against the desk. So where you go up on one side is going to be further forward than where you go down. So up, down. Why are my hands so red? Why is the color? Whatever. You know what I mean, though? So you're taking the thread, pulling it in the groove, and then going in where that groove ends and out where the next groove begins. So kind of at an angle. Okay. Maybe don't make your threads as long as I do. And then with that next thread, you're going to do the same thing. You pull it over into the groove of the cording. And go in at an angle so that it's holding the cord in place, but it's pretty invisible. So now we're going to work our way around up until we get back to this extra cord. So just like before, when you get to the flap, follow the same pattern you have been, just stab through the tail. Again, this does get a little awkward, but just take your time and you'll get through it. All in all, takes about 2 or 3 hours to finish like this. If you use glue instead of sewing, then obviously it'll go a lot faster. That's up to you. It's not necessarily that I don't like glue or I don't trust glue or that there's not, you know, acid-free adhesives that you can use that are going to maintain the integrity of your stitch. I just like hand sewing. It's kind of, I don't know, it's nice to just watch it come together by hand. I just hope that this video helps make it a little less daunting to do. And to know that even if you struggle through the entire thing, it will be fine. Once I get all the way around, you're going to take the part that's still attached and tie a big old knot in the corner. Kind of shape it however you'd like. Trying to pull the knot tight while still making it look cute, I guess. I'm going to take a little bit more thread and stitch this knot in place so that I don't have to worry about it getting loose. Just like before, follow the curve of the cord so that it's not super obvious. Get through the knot, go around the knot, whatever you need to do to secure it. Finally, tie another knot. And I'm going to use some more tape. And the reason I use tape is because this stuff frays like crazy. So by taping it, when I cut it, this tail, it's not going to fall apart, and the next time I go to use this, it's going to be nice and neat. But then we can cut the tape off here. And it comes right apart. Nice and foofy. Looks like this actually used a red core, which is weird. But that's fine. We have a Flatfold. How does it look? Let's put this away and we can talk a little more about it, and I can show you some pictures that are not horribly color corrected. But yeah, that's how I make a Flatfold. Well, that footage was terrible. I'm sorry. I got a cheap, lightweight little digital camera hoping that I could take overhead shots with my ring light and everything.
but I guess I need to fuck with the settings some more. I don't know. That's fine. Hopefully you were still able to make out what the process was, because we do have a cute little finish. I love it. It's going to go in my very purple library, and it's going to go great. Yee. I don't know if you can tell, but the fabric is actually kind of sparkly. Yeah, the camera's not picking it up at all. That's fine. Oh, and you know this scritchy fabric that I was sad that I didn't have enough of to do the insides of? So about 2 days after I finished this, I went to my local reuse craft store and I found a whole nother fat quarter of it. So I could have, but I didn't know they were gonna, it's a reuse store. They get donated random stuff. It's not like I could have planned that, but oh well. I kind of like the two-tone effect, especially since the inside's darker, so when it's sitting on the shelf, it's not like drawing your attention. But yeah, I think it turned out really cute regardless. And now I have 2 of these, and I love them. I need to make more of these. I haven't, like this one I made in like 2020. So this is my second one. So I should do this more often because I do like the finishes. And it's something different than just being hung on the wall or whatever. If you make one of these, please do tag me in Instagram or Blue Sky, DM me on Discord, I don't care. I just want to see it because it's so cool to see what you guys are making. I want to know what different ways you come up with to like decorate the border or to like add your own little flair to this. It could have a big old bow on top. You could, I don't know, add buttons. Show me how creative you guys can be. If you want any of my patterns, they all go on my Patreon first for 3 weeks exclusive, and after that they usually make it onto Etsy. So check it out there. I do hope to slowly go through and make more videos of different finishing tutorials, hopefully with better quality footage, but you know, that's neither here nor there. I tried. If there's a specific finish that you would like me to cover, first check out my website, see if I've already done it in a written form. I might be able to walk you through it that way. But if you really need a video, let me know and I'll see when I can fit it in. Maybe. Because, you know, this stuff takes time. But yeah, whatever you decide to do, keep creating.